The Security Conversations podcast is presented by TLPBLACK, a threat detection and response platform built by a team of the world's best APT researchers. Get historical passive DNS, live C2 monitoring, searchable network IOCs, curated Yara rules, and fresh malware from honeypots and crawlers every day. If you need actionable data, head to tlpblack.net. Tell them Costin sent you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Security Conversations podcast. My guest this week is Greg Linares, Principal Threat Intelligence Analyst at Huntress. Greg, let's start right there. What does the Principal Threat Intelligence Analyst at Huntress do?
So that's my job is never the same. Every day it's different. So it's just looking at where attackers are coming from, what they're doing, how they're targeting, and looking at trends. My biggest responsibility is generally providing all that data, collecting it together, and then providing a end of year report. And that's our threat analyst report that we distribute. Just happened a couple weeks ago, and that's pretty much what my ultimate duty is, to make sure that everyone is informed of what that goes in.
Can you talk a little bit about Huntress as well? What does Huntress do? What do you guys do?
Sure, we are a MDR solution where we provide desktop protection for Windows, Mac, and Linux, and we also provide services for SOC services, and we are identifying threats and helping integrate. We integrate with MSSPs in order to provide security for a wide range of people. We generally make sure that everyone's protected. A big thing here is making sure that your protection is not gate kept by your wallet. So
Right.
we try to provide equal protection for everyone, and that's a big reason why I'm here.
You mentioned the threat report. One of the things I'm excited about having you on the show for, you're an old school cybersecurity guy going back. I think I remember meeting you in the early 2000s. So it
Yeah,
must have been a Black Hat or DEF CON.
had to
So
been. Yeah.
you come with this historical perspective of what cybersecurity looked like. And the threat report that you mentioned kind of gives us a modern understanding of how, I don't want to use the word evolved because that's like an AI word, but how things have changed dramatically over the years. And I want us to spend a little time focusing on these ransomware groups you talk about in the threat report. You describe these ransomware groups as like full-fledged businesses. And I'm curious, what does that look like in practice? Are there defined roles, revenue targets, customer service? When you talk about full-fledged businesses, can you just kind of outline what you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly that. I mean, attackers have KPIs just like we do, and they are running a business. They have a bottom line, they have goals, and there's people in there who are constantly looking at getting the bottom line's worth. And the 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 way I like to put it, the way I like to talk to people about it is, think about car companies right now. When car companies have a product, and one car company comes out with a feature to cut cost on it, you'll see other car companies do the exact same. Car interiors, for instance, they've massively changed over the last couple of years, and it seems like everyone's getting rid of buttons and tactile responses, and that's to keep costs down. And they have one unit to replace if the whole thing goes out, not individual buttons. You just have an interface, and it's terrible
Right.
for us consumers, but makes it easy for them, keeps costs low. Attackers are the same way. They're constantly looking at other attackers and other methods that they're using, taking those, implementing them in their code, rolling it out, and making sure that their bottom line is protected. Most, if they can cut corners anywhere, they will. They absolutely will. And so
Are they
that's
all like this though, or there are professional gangs and then there are opportunists down the tray?
Exactly, and I'll say the good ones are, the ones that are doing this. The ones that are defined. We have the big four
By
groups.
good, you mean successful ones, the ones
Yes,
that are wreaking
yes,
havoc,
exactly.
right?
Yeah, the ones who have done this for a while and they're successful at it. Yeah, it's a good correction. But yeah, like we talk about the big four here with Huntress, and that's Akira, Medusa, RansomHub, and Qilin. That's the big ones we deal with, and they're successful because they run it like this. They run a tight shop, and they are constantly attacking and evolving, and they have defined team members who do X, Y, and Z role. They have an exploit writing, for sure. Kira's got an exploit writing team that's doing that, taking those exploits, implementing them in their tools, then they land on a machine, they hand it off to another operatives.
I'm glad you mentioned those four because according to your report, more than half of the ransomware incidents are tied to just these four groups: the Akira, Medusa, Qilin, RansomHub.
Yeah, yes.
What does that really mean? Does that mean that we only have four? I mean, does that mean there's been consolidation? Are they just like market dominance? Are they the guys who have professionalized it in a place that they're functional? What does it mean?
I mean, it's every defender is going to see who targets their customers, and that's where these four are going to be. As Huntress, we look at small and medium-sized businesses mainly, and MSP integration, and those are the four that are looking at our likely targets, or looking at our verticals. Like Akira is looking for individuals with certain network, edge network devices that they're always targeting. Medusa and the rest are also looking at, hospitals and other groups, other facilities that they're targeting manufacturing. And those are commonly where our customers mostly sit. So these are the ones that we encounter the most because our battlefields cross, essentially. Yeah.
Got it. I'm going to take a little bit of a detour here, but I want to pick your brain
No
on
worries.
this. We've started to hear murmurings and some reports talking about APT groups, nation state type level APT groups, either dabbling with ransomware or hiding within ransomware. And there's been some sort of a blending of APT operators running ransomware attacks, or APT operators perhaps partnering with ransomware groups who already have access to certain places. Is that something you're tracking? Is that a reality where we're starting to see nation state and cyber criminals kind of blending in?
Yeah, I think I'll be like one of the first to actually admit that publicly, anyways. But yes, absolutely. I went to a very good talk where that actually opened my eyes about that, and when Microsoft was discussing where they had the unique insight where certain ransomware groups were operating like APTs, and then suddenly they were not receiving money post. They'd make the ransom, they ransomware the company, company would send money, money would never leave. You
But
know,
there's no
uh,
revenue collection.
yeah,
Like
no
like
revenue
it
collection. Yeah,
got
that's a big flag. And yes, ironically, I was just talking to a group of people this morning about this this random occurrence. And what we're seeing and what we believe is that there's certain nation states that are working with working with ransomware groups, and they're kind of offering maybe integration with exploits. We're seeing like exploits being like old exploits that they've burned or used, hand off to them, as well as tactics used by them. So that is that's actually an interesting development that, and I believe, I mean, it makes sense because now you're able to target companies and places that you were targeting as a nation state, but no one's treating nation state, no one's treating ransomware groups like nation states. And I'm a big believer that I think we should start, changing that factor.
because of how the attribution gets messed up right now. It's all mocked
Exactly.
up, and you're thinking it's just a cyber criminal group that we can manage, and now you're dealing with an adversary that's a lot more advanced and capable.
Yeah, yeah. On top of that, I mean, I remember working with a DFIR group that post incident, we're pretty sure that the nation state that was initially in there dropped ransomware at the end of it, just to
Right.
say, hey, that this was a ransomware group, and we saw evidence that it was a Russian state actor, and they used that to cover their tracks. And initial DFIR team sees ransomware, they're going to look at ransomware. So that was an interesting case in that.
One of the things you mentioned in the report is that ransomware is slowing down, but they're actually hitting harder. And you
Yes.
you, you mentioned the time to ransom statistic that you had tracked from the previous year, and you say time to ransom has jumped from 17 to 20 hours. And I'm curious about what your thoughts are and what does that mean for attacker intent and discipline. And more importantly, what do you think it means for defenders to have that extra 3 hour window before? Just for the audience sake, explain time to ransom just very briefly.
Yeah, time to ransom is our metric where we see the first activity that we can directly link to that ransomware operator or that ransomware group. From that point of, when they first initially get on a machine and start pivoting through all the way to where ransomware is deployed. This year we also had some additional steps where we were able to integrate that with ITDR, where we saw a couple ransomware attackers come in through identity. But most of it was still traditional EDR land, or they edge network devices, remote desktop exposed. That was a big one. Brute force that way and get their ways into devices. So when we have a clear picture of this, we're able to identify a pretty good rate of where these attackers are coming from. Um, and the reason why we saw it go up mainly is the big jump here was attackers are now taking the time to pull information out. They're extorting. They're taking and they were taking this large amount of data from the customer, packing it all together in archives, and uploading it. And sometimes that uploads pretty fast. Other times it's not. It's almost always to a third party. I had an interesting attempt where I was trying to identify ransomware upload speeds and if they were uploading it to controlled services or anything like
Right.
that. Try to fingerprint that, but unfortunately, I think almost every single case it was a third party, content delivery network or one of these major third parties that were being used to host it, Amazon, Cloudflare, things like that. So yeah, that's unfortunate, but that gives us another big point for opportunity for detection is locking down and start tweaking detection rules and procedures that if you start seeing these archive behaviors or these upload behaviors, um, that is a very good indicator that a ransomware event has already occurred and the attacker's already in there and the ransomware is pretty close to being delivered because I think in like 98% of all events, the ransomware occurred nearly right after the upload. There was very few operatives that would go and upload throughout the condition. And if they did, it seemed like they got caught much easier than that. So the strategy was to put it all into one. It looked like they kept. In some cases, we saw them like have multiple paths in there. So they looked like they kept down. They kept a log of where everything they wanted to go, put them all in a log, throw it into one big command line, sucked it all up, and sent it off to the network.
There's two ways to look at that moving from 17 to 20 hours away, and I'm just curious if I could pick your brain a little bit on it. One way to look at it is that it's becoming harder for them to jump around and get the ransomware operations in place, so you get an
Mhm.
extra time window there. The other way
Yep.
to look at it is that they don't need to be fast. Like they could just spend their time rummage through there. If it goes up to 25 hours, nothing has really changed because in most places, we don't have these detection mechanisms built into it there. How do you look at it? Do you think this is a evidence of security postures getting stronger? Or this is just more evidence that these guys, they don't need to be fast. Like you can just spend your
Uh,
time rummaging around.
Honestly, I still think it's the later of those. These attackers, like if you look at other threat reports, you'll see from areas in your companies that protect larger environments, like
Hmm.
those enterprise environments. They'll be in there longer. They'll be in
Oh, yeah.
in cases because there's much more network to cover. There's much more to pivot through, and when we were dealing
Much
with
more for
mostly
us to defend to, right? Like
yes,
that's
yes,
the
yes.
parallel, right?
Yes. So where we're going from most, medium to small businesses, there's probably not that much to go through all these networks. So we're seeing these times a little bit faster than others. However, you're absolutely right. Like these attackers they can go around, take a lunch break, go around for a while, come back the next day, and in most of these cases, people are not aware of this. And the low and slow attackers are in some strategies just as good as the fast ones. The fast ones are, like Akira. Akira is
Noise,
really
yeah, right. I was
yeah,
going to
Akira
pivot to Akira for a second there because they're an outlier. The Akira time to
yes.
ransom, according to your report, is 6.5 hours, which is much, much faster than the average. We're talking the
They
average going up to 20 hours.
unfortunately, Akira is very good at what they do. They have a very good tool set. They have a very good exploit writing team, and they know when they get in a network, they have a pretty good idea. There's a lot of theories behind this. The idea is that they do their research beforehand. That would be through their purchasing of info stealer dumps and everything like that, and doing a professional recon on
So
these
when you talk
companies.
about those professional groups at the top that are business like, Akira is the model
Akira is
of,
also
yeah,
also a good candidate for, potentially nation state, crossover as well.
got you.
Yeah, so they're an Apex ransomware group that is very good at what they do. Don't see them falling off anytime soon. And they also adapt very well. They have and they don't they don't change their tactics because it keeps working. They're the ones who are going through edge devices. They're looking at those to go in through, and the only problem with that is they're dependent on vulnerabilities in edge networks devices and RDP devices. But fortunately for them, edge network devices are trash, and so are and everyone leaves RDP open and no one monitors it. Unfortunately, that's brute force passwords. We see that all the time. So yeah.
Before we move on from the ransomware section of the report, I want to give you a bigger picture question. How bad is the ransomware problem today versus where it was a year ago, 2 years ago, when it was like at epidemic levels and we had MGM hotels and everyone seemed to be compromised? Have we generally, would you say, gotten better? Are we getting better? Where would you, as an industry?
I mean, honestly, I would love to say that we're getting better, but I mean, we see groups like scattered spider, lapis, the shiny hunters. Just they just got another massive compromise. I think yesterday or like last night, and we see ransomware groups like posting 30, 40 groups now. I think what's happened is we got a little numb as a reporting, so we're not reporting all these as
It's
much
just another
anymore.
one, right?
And it's
It just
just another
becomes
one.
just another one. It's
It's
like
just
zero-day
another noise.
reporting, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast. When you keep hearing all these ransomware, where it's kind of we don't talk about it as loud anymore. What I will say is there are. I was able to identify with Huntress where ransomware would have been deployed. Like a lot of potential. Where it was that and stopping those, and we got a lot better at those because we're getting a lot better at identifying where those cases are occurring, and when we take those and we adapt those into a lot of tooling and such. And so when we one thing that we're noticing is I think the ransomware groups are also getting kind of like sterile in the sense that they're not trying much new things. They just the same
They don't
playbook, the
have to
same.
though, right?
Yeah, and that's for most cases, no. I would say, if there's, teams are not being monitored, groups are not being monitored well, yeah, they go in, they do the same playbook every single time. And, everyone jokes about seeing, talk about all these sophisticated, attacks that going on, but it's the same thing we see every single time, like the same, they go in, they dump credentials, they get, they look for tickets, they go for your golden tickets and your Kerberos and Mimikatz. To get those, they pivot around, they find your shares, they suction those all up, and then they drop the ransomware.
That's just
That's
kind of the playbook. It's a
that
standard
is the
playbook that
playbook.
they don't really deviate from. And the idea that, they evolve and everyone is doing different things, it's all just a basic standard operating procedure, right?
Yep. And I mean, honestly, it layered defense goes a long way here for individuals, and properly segregating networks, segregating permissions is a big one. And the big goal that I try to tell everyone is make it so that if you have to access these and, from a ransomware group standpoint, that it's noisy. Just make sure that you can make noise and you can identify when something happens, and that is half the battle. Honestly. Yeah.
Another data point I wanted to flag was ClickFix.
Oh
ClickFix
boy.
accounted for about more than 50% of malware loader activity. And it's not something we've been, consumed with 3 years ago. Today, it's like in every threat report, ClickFix is popping up. What do you think? Why do you think this specific technique has become so dominant? Is it about scale? Is it about psychology, user psychology? And before you answered, if you could just give the audience a very brief definition of what we refer to as ClickFix.
So ClickFix is a group of web-based malware that you go to a website and it pops up an indicator that says that you have computer issues and you need to fix these issues. The big ones here is a CAPTCHA. You see these are the new ones where the CAPTCHA is where it says it's a fake CAPTCHA, which is a subtype of ClickFix. And with those, it's like, oh, you can verify you're human, copy and paste these follow these commands and copy and paste these into your start menu to validate that you're a human. Or there's plenty of variants for that. There's Linux, Mac, and Windows versions of it. And
At a high
with that,
level, they're walking you through installing malware,
yes, and the
believing
whole
and be tricked into thinking that you're fixing this problem that
and
they've
that's
identified.
exactly why it works. With when you copy and paste these commands into the start menu, from many standpoints, it looks exactly like what a user would do to do this. And then once they do that, they download. There's many stages and many payloads that go in, and then eventually it results into them stealing your information. Usually, there's plenty of payloads, but it's always PowerShell or JavaScript, malicious JavaScript, or one of these many different payloads. But going back to your initial question of why these are so popular, that's pretty easy. We can thank John Hammond for his wonderful
Shout out to John.
demonstration. Yeah, yeah, the malware meister John Hammond, malware lord over there for bringing everyone's awareness. No, in all joking, John did a really good coverage of this and demonstrated the how successful this would be. And I think that really honestly popped up quite a bit. After that, you can watch it skyrocket after the post John effect, the Hammond effect, I will call it. Yeah, the Hammond effect is it caused those to actually go up pretty high in that. And it's a problem we'll probably see for years from now in
What's
the
the
different
defense
forms.
for this?
The defense for
Shouldn't the
the
browser makers do something here? I mean, help me understand where the mitigation, where the possible mitigation is when user psychology is so much at play. You're actually fixing this problem, and suddenly you're installing malware. It's just a very weird way to think about how does one defend this.
Yeah. Microsoft attempted to fix it. I think they added some prevention of, there's not a direct copy and paste anymore, or they have a warning when you do copy and paste from the
Right.
browser
Putting a
into
little
the
bit of roadblocks in between, right?
list, a little bit of roadblocks. I think Defender even added some protection to look into see what the clipboard is being applied to from the web browser. But then you have ones that tell the user to type
Yeah.
those
It'll
straight
just be
into.
cat and mouse, right? It'll just be
Yes,
one bypass after the other,
it's
right?
gonna be a bypass and I think the big goal here is gonna be app lock security in corporate environments. Those users who don't need to use these PowerShell or these things, locking those down. And but even then, there's still tools and commands that you can do to enable PowerShell. It's all, again, it is, you're right. It's absolutely a cat and mouse procedure, but it's identifying when those occur. A big one is like, if a user is not using PowerShell and all of a sudden a PowerShell script executes it on a certain time, they're not logged in, or they're not, it's not
Right.
during a domain join, and things like, notable events like that, red flag. That's
Right.
that's an easy investigation. So that's where it comes down.
Are you a fan
But
of user education, like teaching people not to do
absolutely,
this?
yeah. But unfortunately,
Just
I don't think it. I don't. I'm a huge fan of it. Do I think it works?
we know
No.
it doesn't work, right? That's the thing, right? Like we know
Yeah,
that this
exactly.
user education doesn't work. You'll teach people, you'll ship some videos and teach people how to identify it, and then the next thing you know, their computer slows down and they're pasting instructions. And the other thing is, like, if you go do some searches, like if you're actually you're not a specific target for the lure, but you're searching for something else, you get ClickFix there as well. We
Yes.
started to see
Yeah.
them playing with some AI and some ChatGPT type things as well. So we know that the guys are investing heavily in making sure ClickFix continues to work. And I'm curious if it's a technical mitigation we put into place, or if it's a human mitigation where we try to teach people not to rely on these things. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, and you're right. Like, let me back up a little bit about those techniques that they're using to get these in front of people, because I mean, they're everything. They're for everything from phishing to website hijacks. Matter of fact, one of the most fascinating ones I saw, where there was attackers who compromised companies who were already had ad sharing and ad programs, campaigns on Google and other websites and things like that. So they hijacked existing trusted campaigns from
Malvertising, tie it into malvertising, the whole malvertising
yeah,
space.
and yeah, exactly. And a lot of times we see them, build up companies and try to do that, and then hijacked websites. But there was a very good investigation of from using these trusted ones, and then they sell these access too. So
Right.
that's the other thing. So that they're making money off that, and they're making, and there was a group offering that as a platform that they can put your malware in front of X amount of millions of people, and that's just another, point of revenue for them.
Are we going to be
Uh,
reading about ClickFix in next year's report? Do you think this is something that is here to
yeah,
stay?
unfortunately, yes. I think at least 2 more years, for this, and unless something else, equally as, I will, equally as stupid with the rate that Microsoft is throwing in, vibe coding and features and vibe coding, opportunities for things to go wrong in Windows these days. I would not be surprised if they decide to throw something else in there.
Right.
Case in
And it'll be
point,
a variant of it at some point down the
yeah,
road.
case in point, we had a vulnerability in Notepad this year. So that like a remote
Yeah.
code yeah,
Introduced because they've shipped AI into
yeah.
Notepad.
So that I mean, yeah, we'll see
It's not
ClickFix
only
and
Microsoft though, it's everyone is shoving AI into everything and we have attack surfaces everywhere. I think we'll be fine
correct.
on the job front.
Unfortunately, yes, yeah, we have very good job security for the next 5 or 10 years. So yes, yeah, that's where we stand on that one.
One of the things you and I both did is bury the lead on this report because the big story in your threat report is RMM tool abuse. The
Yeah,
calculation is that RMM tool abuse jumped 277% as these ransomware gangs, normalize this living off the land world. Set it up for the audience. What is RMM tool abuse, and why is it such a sweet spot for everyone?
sure. And let me go back, and it's not just ransomware groups. It's everyone is doing this now.
Every
This
threat
is
actor.
every threat actor is implementing RMM abuse. So RMM abuse is your remote monitoring and management tool software. Is that it's going to be your Altera, your Screen Connects, your LogMeIns, all these remote desktop utilities that are being implemented in your company for your
Widely
IT.
deployed in every enterprise everywhere.
Yes, and through your MSPs, everything. It's for everything for them to, log in and manage your machine, remotely. And so, attackers
Legitimate functional software
absolutely,
that you have to
legitimate,
have, right?
perfectly. That well, have to have is a question, that's th
You
anyways,
shouldn't,
but
but you
y
have to have.
yes, yes, these legitimate tools are now being used by, attackers in order to, um, get into machines, and there's a couple different variants of this. Is where they try to social engineer a user to download one of these, imitating that, they're a trusted, IT individual to get them to install this. There's payloads that actually instead of, connecting to a rat now or, remote access Trojan, they're not using the remote access Trojans, they're using RMM, tooling instead. And and there's many other cases, but what the big thing here is these tools are trusted, and they're signed, so that, there's already protection in them, and then and these attackers are getting really good. Matter of fact, we've seen a lot of info stealer dumps that they will even monitor and record what RMM tool surfaces are in the environment that they stole from. So attackers can now preload and make these campaigns so that when they are in these environments, they're going to be using the same tools that are existing that's already existing and being used in these environments. So these defenders are getting in there and they're seeing, oh, yeah, there's a Altera Screen Connect or an existing connection going on, and that's exactly the one they use. That is expected behavior, and unfortunately, that's the bad guys using those. So
At what point does this RMM abuse stop being like a misuse problem and become a product accountability problem? You understand the question I'm leading it is, shouldn't these vendors be responsible for building in like stronger abuse detection, the things you're talking about, some guardrails? Should we rely on the RMM technology providers to be the ones?
absolutely, yeah, we should hold them accountable. As a defender, I am so sick of these RMM tools being abused, and that groups like groups that are companies that manage these and make these. Um, do not have guardrails in them or have inadequate guardrails. Uh,
What
on
should
top,
those guardrails look like? Like you have to advise them. Let's say you get a call from one of them and say, "Hey, how should we go about building in some technical controls to avoid this RMM tool abuse?" Is there like
I mean,
specific easy things, or is this a
I,
hard problem?
I'm not going to say it's an easy fix, because unfortunately we're already gone past. If these were, had guardrails in the beginning, we'd be a different, this would be an entirely different scenario, because now that the cat's out of the bag, attackers are still reusing some of these old binaries into old tools, and they're using cracked versions of these tools and other things like that to prevent them from being patched.
Right.
And so that's part of the problem. Right now, I would say, like, please work with like EDR, MDR companies right now to give us more data. Give us
What do
ways
you
that
mean
we
by
can identify.
data?
Like, we're looking for if we're tracking these, we're looking at whether communication that these are doing. We would love to have more granular abilities to identify just data that's being used.
Because
These,
they
like,
have
where is
that visibility, right?
Yes, I imagine they do. Yes, so they would be great to open this up, help with MDR and EDR companies and everyone else defending to help us identify misuse. Help us share knowledge about when these are being cracked, who's being used these, groups that are using these, and IOCs that were, hey, that these 20 servers have abused these in the last 24 hours. Share those with us, because everyone's losing. Everyone's losing with those. And on top of that, there's a lot of we're seeing a lot of attackers kind of sideload or implement other tools that help protect them from being identified. And these are tools that
Right. So we're
modify.
starting to see that cat and mouse playing happening
Yes,
there, which
yes.
suggests that these RMM vendors are building in a little bit of guardrails. And does it?
Yes, I would agree that there is guardrails, and we've seen some vendors actually backtrack on certain events and go back and say, "Oh, we are actually implementing these," and we applaud that. However, I think it's a little bit too late, and there's attackers out there who've, like I said, cracked their software and using abused software, using old versions, and it's because the attackers know that those versions don't have those features. They won't have those features, and we're seeing sophisticated attackers modify installers, like I said, bring in their own different tools that help hide when the RMM is being used, or there's a lot of things. It's a giant cat and mouse, uh, you know, a
Yeah.
giant cat and mouse game for everyone involved. So it's and again, this is going to be going on for years. I know red teams right now who don't buy command and control software. They're not using them, because why use that when they can just use an RMM tool and
That is
get the same?
trusted and
Yeah.
entirely trusted and not
Yep.
monitored. The
Yep.
burden today, right? The burden today is entirely on businesses and MSPs to monitor their own tools. But in a real world, what does real detection for this RMM abuse look like, where attacker is using your tools against you? Like, what does a typical organization do? Like, you're security forward, you're aware of the problem, you're not getting mitigations from your vendor, that there's this trust abuse issue happening in your organization. How would you recommend a realistic way to think about this as a defender in an organization? Like, how the hell do you do any sort of real detection for this?
I can tell you a lot of teams right now, they can't even identify when they're being misused, because again,
Wow, it's that bad.
we have had incidents where a customer argued with us that sessions were valid, and then they go back and they're like,
A
actually,
malicious session.
yes, yeah, actually that session was not a good one. We're sorry. So that,
Oof.
and again, that's why I'm telling these RMM vendors, please help us.
The onus
Um,
is on them, right? Not
I,
only on the technical mitigations, but on the data sharing, the IOC sharing, the technique sharing, so that at
I,
least we can build our detections better.
I'm a big believer that if you make a tool and it's being abused by bad guys everywhere, and you don't have the ethics to communicate with other individuals that, hey, my tool is being used and abused somewhere else. Here's how do I find and abuse my tool. Um,
You know what the problem is though, Greg?
yeah,
They're all bad, so you don't have an alternative, right? Like, you can't say, like, okay, rip and replace this tool with this other RMM tool, because they're all being abused in the same way. It's not a specific
I,
single vendor problem. It's a
I didn't say it, but yeah,
Is
I'm
that
glad you
fair?
did.
No, is that a fair representation
Yes,
of the fact that,
absolutely.
because the advice you always want to give to people is, listen, just rip and replace this thing and go with someone who takes security more seriously, and you have a pen test report and you have all of this evidence
Uh,
that at least their posture is better. In this
yeah,
case, the alternative is just the same as the
there's
other one.
yeah, unfortunately, we're seeing every single RMM tool being abused, used, utilized, or in some form targeted by attackers. And so
Yeah.
and there's even some that they prefer for doing different activities. There's some that they prefer for long terms. And that's just the nature of society right now. It's the nature of cybersecurity, and attackers will. And if it changes, attackers will learn which one. If
Yeah.
a vendor goes, and they'll
It'll be the
move
dance
around.
forever. Yeah.
Yes, that's correct, and
So
it's the
what you're
ba
saying is that RMM abuse is going to be in the report next year again.
Oh, yes, yes, I think until we, I don't know, if we until we get some kind of, guardrails like, one thing I was thinking about is within, tooling inside the RMM system itself to identify when it's being abused, like, there like, inside, detection
Some
inside
sort
the
of
ARM.
inside infrastructure detection mechanism somewhere.
Correct, that could be a tool. I don't know, I don't that,
Along the
um
same lines, along the same lines of ClickFix and RMM abuse, which is this again, abusing of trust, abusing of human
I could
instinct.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I can hear the people in the background. That's what AI is for, and I'm
Yeah, yeah, I got to bring its
oh,
own problems.
oh man, that RMM vendors, please do not count on AI fixing that problem.
Oh
Please
la
do
la.
not. Okay.
Anyone don't account
Yeah.
on AI fixing all
Yeah.
security problems
Yeah.
anyway.
So
Want to pivot to another aspect of the report here, which is around stolen credentials. Along the same lines, no need to hack into something when you can log into it, right? Stolen
uh,
credentials, I think, according to your report, has fueled about 40% of identity attacks.
that sounds
Are we
about
at a
right.
point where password theft is itself a software a supply chain problem? And where is this access coming from? Help me
That,
understand what you mean by
there's a
stolen credentials.
There's a lot of where that comes from. That's everything from previous breaches where attackers. One thing that I can absolutely say that AI is actually being used for is taking dumps that they have in multiple dumps and matching together these information details. Sometimes that's not a perfect, but when you have 40 different dumps with bunch of gigabytes of data, attackers are getting pretty good at using tools like that to condense these, pull out, match where individuals, match, companies, victims to other information that's been stolen or obtained, and put it all into one area, and then get those in front of purchasers faster than ever. So that is one thing that we see being used, and attackers are using these tools, and there's a lot of other tools out there on top of that, not just passwords, but token theft, session theft. All these are the new the new de facto
Yeah.
standard. Yeah, attacker in the middle platforms are being abused. They're stealing these device token attacks we saw as well. And there's again, I hate to say it again, but another cat and mouse situation where new technology comes out, attackers use these, find bypasses or downgrade attacks. That was a big one where attackers are downgrading certain,
Yeah, I just saw that in a new Cisco thing just this week. There's
Yep.
the SD1 APT attack where they were actually downgrading and doing the infection that way.
Yeah,
It's
and
pretty scary.
unfortunately, when I was doing vulnerability discovery, even back in the day, all the way back at EI, the first thing we would target in every system we were looking at, if we were looking at a platform to break it, legacy support. And let me tell you, that's exactly what attackers are doing. They're smart, and so anytime you can move something to go into a legacy mode or support a legacy, a lot of that time, that code is
That's the
hastily put
sweet
in there,
spot with a lot of
and
old
yeah.
vulnerabilities, unpatched
Yeah.
things, and yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that goes everything from Office all the way up to enterprise, enterprise solutions where legacy support is ideal for finding vulnerabilities. So yeah, and attackers are doing that. And again,
Yeah.
cat and mouse situation.
When you look at all this data, annual data, you look at all of it, is there anything in there that surprises you? Is there like a pattern that you notice that change your own internal assumptions about how things work? Or is it very much more of the same? Give me a sense of writing the report last year and writing the report this year, and in your brain, like what fires?
Oh, what's different? I think it's just really depends on strategies. Attackers are one thing I've noticed a lot. Attackers are moving away from actually is malware being used in um, in events. We've had completely malwareless breaches where it's all
Describe
low
that.
band.
Describe
That
that end to end for me.
Yeah, so that is attacker comes in, they stole a credential, they brute force a password, they get in or they steal they steal a session, they're inside the machine, and then 100% from that point on, they're using lolbins, trust these built-in binaries are
Living off the
trusted.
land, yeah.
Yeah, living off the land,
Binaries.
uh, and they're using all these tools or other tools that they get, and they're not using malware. They're not using remote access tools. They're not using C2s. They're not using any of that. So they're just living off the land from complete end to end, grabbing everything they need, pivoting around, escalating, dumping files, dumping passwords, additional passwords, and going that from start to finish. So you're getting these entire attack chains where there's not a single piece of malware involved.
Right.
Traditional
And
yeah,
right. And
malware.
traditional anti-malware mechanisms to detection goes. But in between there, in fairness, they're making a lot of noise too, right? In between there,
Absolutely.
they're making a lot of noise and there are a lot of places there for detections. And now I don't want to
Yes.
paint the picture that everything is terrible because I feel like you and I are having this conversation with our history of seeing this shit year after
Yeah.
year after year. It starts to feel demoralizing. But at the same time, for defenders, there's a lot of places to figure out detections and figure out just even if you don't block the initial infection, you block some exfiltration. There's a lot of different places there. Are we getting better at that, do you feel, as an industry?
I'm going to say yes, with some caveats. I think what happens in this is attackers are moving fast, and so when something gets detected or something gets is noted, used to be, I feel like attackers, good attackers anyways, ones who are good at breaking in and breaching and successful attackers, I feel like they are aware of when things are no longer good and they look for opportunities for changes. And a lot of attackers aren't. A lot of attackers just run the same playbook and like when they get in there, they can't bypass something, they get bored and they leave. And we've seen that happen. Um, Other times, unfortunately, we also see the same playbook work in environments too. It's, I think right now, um, I think attackers are also um, focusing on everyone's burnt out over the same things, and so it's human fatigue, noise fatigue, and all that is back up to a new high. There's so many attacks occurring, and automated attacks versus it's only going to skyrocket with new tools and agentic stuff that we're seeing. It's going to just hit there's going to be a massive amount of noise to figure out what if it's real attackers, automated attackers, or something in between. I think that's going to be a massive problem coming up in the near future, and I think that's where it comes down to is how tired are you? How do you triage? How do you solve that? And that's where the groups that are able to triage that and respond to the ones that are not noise, that's where you're going to win. That's the ones we actually see winning in environments. Yeah.
Last question. We're not
Mhm.
talking to the big high-end everyday enterprises that have
Uh,
money to buy every tool and every bit of security software. Because we have a haves and a have-nots in cybersecurity where the haves have all the money to spend and the other folks don't have much resources and you have to, that's the reason we have these
yep.
problems, these ransomware problems, is that no one has a dedicated security team with 15 people tracking and monitoring and doing detections for all of this. So I want you to talk to that organization that does a little bit of the have-nots. Are
Okay.
there 3 or 4 specific controls or investments that can materially reduce risk
Okay.
in the coming year with everything we just talked about and with everything we know that this is going to continue, what's coming down the pike? A simple question is, where should people put their limited budget resources? Give me a
Oh,
sense of what you would do and what are the top priority things that you absolutely should
man, I looked at this
have.
question. I looked at this question when you're in this document, and I there's so many other variants of this. Like, what business is this? Because what environment,
Fair.
the big thing is here, if you're a 50 to 100-person business, but you're making your ice cream shops across, across a couple places, the obvious thing there is, with your cloud usage, lock down your cloud usage and multi MFA, all the accounts, all that, and just do not install things that you don't need. Leave it very clean, and shop. A lot of these businesses are using Mac, which is better for those environments than Windows. But then on the other flip side, if you're a 50 to 100 person, AI company, startup AI company is trying to make,
Your
you got to
threat
work.
model is there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
your
yeah,
threat model
yeah.
is completely different. You're going to have to worry about nation state attackers because guess what? They are going to target you. They're going to, they're going to go after you. They're going to target your folks, and 150, 100 person AI company, that is going to be juicy to them because they are thinking that you're not prepared for this. And unfortunately, that's how it is.
Are those
Yeah.
controls and spend different from the ice cream shop guy?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't it the same MFA, the same locking down?
Uh,
What's the recommendation for those folks?
if you're working if you're working in a high risk environment, I would say a high risk is technology. Anything
Manufacturing, like
manufacturing,
the ones you saw in the report.
anything that's dealing with PII. Attackers want PII. They want it. Anything with PII tech, or they provide services to other companies. We're seeing attackers target these smaller companies for their access and for their
To
contracts
piggyback onto,
with
right?
others. Those are the ones that we're seeing. And I'm going to say this is like endpoints. You're going to need an endpoint security. You're going to need to know what those are, and you're going to have you're going to be aware of when these attacks are coming. So you have to have at least a security individuals on your team, because especially if you're working in tech, because attackers will target your employees. They will they'll social engineer them. They'll find out who they are, and we're seeing attackers looking at these smaller tech companies, especially because they're not prepared for this. Yeah.
How much are you just not running into places where multi-factor authentication is still not properly implemented or implemented at all? I mean,
Oh man.
it,
What,
whenever
what-
we do these podcasts and we do this advice bit for folks, you go through the list of like things to do, and MFA is right at the top, and then you look at the breach report and they didn't have MFA, or they didn't have it properly implemented, or there was
that is
some way.
that is the thing. There is so many. I can't tell you how many times where it was like, oh, we would have added MFA that next week, or we removed MFA because it broke this other thing, and we hired these contractors and their system didn't allow us to have this MFA, and we forgot to reapply it. Like I can't tell you, or it like, hey, two factor, like my SMS, is my two factor, and attackers are just SIM swap them. That's like
Yeah.
SIM swapping is like, that is such a low barrier these days. It's almost a joke. Um, MFA not being applied, or secure MFA, or true multi
Properly
passkeys,
implemented, yeah.
and all these. Yeah, we see that. Or better yet, we see attackers even doing targets at the MFA, like MFA exhaustion, where they keep hitting up someone's notification and they're just waiting for someone to accidentally hit the accept, or things like that. We see that all the time. So unfortunately, that is a factor, and I would love to tell you that it's a widely implemented thing. I'd say it's better than it. I would always say it's better than ever, because a lot of vendors and a lot of places are requiring it on installation, and we've seen that more often. Um, but it's still, attackers they're gonna find the ones that it's not. And the first thing an attacker does is look for one that's not applied.
Last question for you, and we just talked about this, and it just comes across as totally demoralizing. Everything is shit, and it's just
Correct.
gonna get worse,
Yep.
and we really have very little few ways to defend against it. And instead of asking you what keeps you up at night, I want to ask, as a threat hunter and someone in the trenches, like, what wakes you up in the morning to become energized to do this amidst all this demoralizing kind of mindset? Help me understand how you approach it.
So for me, the thing that's really important to me is, uh, I've been on a big pedestal about this lately. Is that we're not defending data anymore. We're not. We're defending people's lives in many cases, where attackers are using this data to we've seen attackers target dissidents out of countries and people who've left their country and looking for hiding. There's individuals that are everything from witness protection or we're seeing attackers where we're seeing where the end point of cyber can actually impact lives. And again, that's
That
not
gives you a
common.
little bit of purpose, right? I mean, it
Yes,
it
that
it
yeah,
adds purpose
absolutely.
to what you do, right?
Absolutely. And like I'm very passionate about making vendors, be aware of this and identify that, hey, this if they breach you and your data, it might just be a chain into something else where they use that to get to someone else or and a lot of things the other things we see is a lot of groups are doing like extortion groups where these individuals are getting this information and then um doing sextortion or extortion on individuals and causing them to have, you know,
Right.
traumatic events. And that is, anytime we stop that or help, people prevent that from happening, that's what gets me up. Every time, making sure that people are safe is a pretty big thing of, why I'm here doing this.
Greg
Mm,
Linares, Principal
mm.
Threat Intelligence Analyst at Huntress. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.